question of what drives happiness at work and how a big part of this is being accepted and valued by others for who we are as individuals. But that's easier said than done, particularly in large teams and organizations where we're just one of many, or where fast paced environments and high pressure workloads don't allow much time for unhurried conversations. Joining me today is Carolyn Stebbings, who sits on the UK Executive Committee at RAPP UK, a global creative marketing agency, where she also leads the Operational Excellence team and the Diversity, Equity and Inclusion agenda. Carolyn is a fellow of the Institute of Data and Marketing. She's been on Data IQ's top 100 list an impressive 9 times and has been recognised as a leader in kindness, leading light. She also co-chairs OmniWomen, Omnicom Group's community of senior female leaders, and sits on the Global Advisory Board for Women in Tech. Caroline describes her purpose as to help those from marginalised groups be the best version of themselves. Welcome to the Business of Being Brilliant, Carolyn.
Thank you, Helen. Thank you for having me on.
Oh, it's a real pleasure to welcome you on the show, and congratulations on your many accolades and awards. That must feel really satisfying after your years of supporting others in the organisations.
Satisfying, but also very humbling as well when it's read out in such altogether collectively. Yes.
Yeah, I know what you mean. A few guests do say that. So, oh, wow, did I really do all of that?
Yeah.
It always makes me chuckle. Well, I'm really looking forward to exploring, what helps us individually to be happy in our work lives. Because we know a lot of people aren't enormously engaged in their work or even actively thinking about leaving in their current employer in the next couple of years. And as I was thinking about our conversation today, I was remembering how, over the last few years, there's been quite a buzzword about, bringing your whole self to work. And some people love that concept and some people think, well, why would I do that? There's parts of me I'm very happy to leave in my home life. But I think we're going to be looking at it almost from the other way round in a way, which is as an organization, as leaders and as team managers, how can we recognize that people are individuals and have lives outside of work, right?
Absolutely. And I think it is really quite key that organizations do start to do that. I get we all have a private part of our lives. We all want to keep something a little bit sort of secret, I suppose, in a way, because that makes others more curious or makes us more interesting. But when organizations fail to truly understand the individual, I personally feel they're not getting the most out of that individual. If you understand not only what makes them tick in a work environment, but also what makes them tick in their home environment, then you're just not going to see them being 100% always on because they don't feel seen. They don't feel seen and they don't feel heard if you're not accepting the whole individual. And it's probably one of the things we have here at RAPP. We have a purpose as a business, which is called Standing Up for Individuality. And that is really recognizing the 360-degree person. I think people turn up and they don't really believe it, but I believe it. I try really hard to live it. It's not always easy. And again, picking up on your point, Helen, some people do want to keep things private. We have to respect that when people want to do that. But on the whole, we try really hard to say what's going on in your life, because if you're having a tough time, that could knock over into your work life. If we know, we can be supportive. Do they need to take time out? Do they need to do shorter working days? I'm a great believer in looking to the whole 360-degree person.
Yes. And I love the way you talk about it as individuality. And I think what you were touching on there is that it's not just a good thing to do to be a nice employer, but actually, if you don't pay attention to this as an employer, there are big potential benefits to your organization that you're simply going to miss out on or fail to realize, right? So there's a real business case for this.
Absolutely, I think there is. And I don't. When I say business case, I don't want it to. I would never want it to become a tick box exercise. When you introduced me, chief operating, DE&I inclusion, um, I never wanted that to be a tick box exercise. It has to come naturally. It has to be part of your DNA. So when you are trying to make it the business case, when it is good business sense, is when you are saying to individuals right from get go, when they're in the interview process, what makes you tick? What do you do outside of work, as well as how do you excel inside work? Where do you want to go with what you're doing now and what you don't want to be doing? And how can we support you in that? A number of people over the years, particularly those maybe who take on parenting or caring roles, I've sat with when they've sort of said, I think it's time for me to leave. And you say, why? Well, because it doesn't quite work with a 5-day week. It's like, but if you love being here and the work you do makes you a rising star, makes you a real sort of rock star in delivering, let's work around that. I've had people move to sort of 4-day weeks because then that gives them an extra day to do some of those responsibilities, to do shortened days, to do more fluid days. But unless you sit and have that conversation, I think the individual feels written off. And as a business, you can lose some incredible talent
Hmm.
just by asking a few probing questions.
Yeah, I thought those three questions were fantastic. What do you care about outside of work? Where do you want to go in your work life? And how can we support you? I mean, those are three straight off the top of your head questions that, can open up so much and be so meaningful for the person that's being asked them. They think, I mean, straight away, as the person who those questions are being put to, you would think this, whoever I'm speaking to really is genuinely interested, and it's an invitation to open up, isn't it? And I remember when I was researching for my book and I was talking to people in different roles, and someone said to me, a senior woman in financial services, the best thing that someone once said to her was to ask her, what do you really want to have a shot at? Not in the next year,
Mm.
but in the longer term. You just sat, and I don't think we ask those kinds of questions very often. We're a bit more short term focused, or it's a bit more of a transactional performance or development conversation. But those three questions are great. And I think, you live and breathe this kind of conversation, and you role model that for others in so many ways in your work. I guess a challenge perhaps for people listening is, well, we can't necessarily clone Carolyn to run all our teams and look after all our team members, or we've got a few great leaders who do that in our organization, but we also know there are pockets where these kinds of conversations don't happen. So I guess the big challenge is, how do you encourage that way of thinking and behaving among anyone who is involved in recruiting and managing people, right?
It's a really good question to ask, Helen, and it doesn't come naturally to everybody. I'm not even sure it always came naturally to me. I don't know. I think it was probably came back to, that old adage of treat others how you want to be treated yourself. And so I wanted people to ask me. Therefore, the counter to that is I need to ask others. So what we try to do here is when a hiring position is opened, we support that hiring manager with inclusive hiring practices, making sure that there's not just nepotism going on when they're looking at an interviewee prospect panel, that it's a diverse panel, possibly quite often pushing them to interview people they wouldn't normally go to pick, because I believe diverse teams deliver better results. Then when that interviewee comes into the business, we urge them not just to speak to their immediate team or their line manager, but also to talk to a panel of people that work elsewhere in the business. I think it's really important. You talk about other businesses, maybe not having people that are overtly high on emotional IQ or asking those softer questions. But actually, there might be people outside those hiring managers who are. So offer up a panel for your interviewee to come in to look at a group of other people. Maybe it's over a coffee and they can see someone that looks like them. Whether that's age, race, gender, they can see that the business is more than the person that's going to be looking after them. And then there's other things we tend to say to our line managers: you really should be sitting down on a regular basis iteratively to know and understand the people that work with you. Just have a coffee. Ask them how they're doing. Ask them where their career path is going. Ask them a little bit more about their personal life. Everybody has to be committed to leaning in. And I quite often say to people, don't ask someone how they are unless you've truly got the time to listen to the answer. Because otherwise it's just, it's just a comment that you might as well have said, I'm going to buy some blue bananas. And if someone responds with, yeah, I'm fine, normally they're not. So in my experience, you've got to ask that question 3 times. And the chances are by the time you get to the third one, it's, well, actually, I have started to think that I'm at the top of where I am now. I want to have another challenge. Can I have that challenge in the role I'm in now? Or there's been something I've been meaning to ask you, but I haven't really had the courage to do it. But now you've asked me 3 times, it brings that person out. And these are tools. They're just tools. They're mechanisms that we can all learn.
Yeah, that's really interesting to hear how you approach that, both with your new joiners and then supporting line managers. With the new joiners, when you said, get them to meet lots of different people over coffee, is that as part of the selection process, or is it that once they've had the job offer, then
No,
kind of
it's
before
part
they
of
join?
part of the selection process. And bizarrely, it came out of a learning where it's a good few years ago now. There was a young woman who came in to take on one of our data analytics roles. And it was only after she had the job and I was sitting down and talking to her, and she said, I'd heard a lot about RAPP and that's why I wanted to come here. But she said, had I not heard about RAPP, I probably wouldn't have taken the job. And I said, well, why? And she said, because I was interviewed by my line manager, who was a man. I was interviewed by 2 people that wanted to see my presentation that were in the team. They were men. I was interviewed by the department head, who was a man. So I saw 4 men in my 3 interviews. And had I not known what RAPP was like, I would have thought, am I going to turn up and be the only woman there? And it was her that made me think, oh my goodness, that's so right. We're so much more diverse than that. We're 54% women. So what can we do about it? And she helped me come up with the idea of, well, why don't we do something in the recruitment process once you've got down to a short list where those people meet a broader range of people? Not just from the analytical team, but maybe from the creative team or the technical team or project management. And it's worked wonders.
Yeah, that's such a good idea. And I love the contrast in a way. We're talking about recognizing that people are individuals and understanding the unique kind of interests and characteristics of each individual. At the same time, there's that real human need for us all to bond and to know that there are people like me where I'm going to work. So it's kind of like a tension between seeing people as individuals, but also recognizing that we need to see other people similar to us to feel perhaps a sense of affinity or being understood, or just simply knowing that it's not going to be a lonely experience in some way.
You're so right. Going back to what you said at the top of the call around happiness is I've had jobs. I can think of one particular job that I went through for a whole year and I must have cried every night on my way home because I was just going to stick at it for a year so that it looked right on my CV. I wouldn't do that now, and I would hope that no one in my working organisation or in my teams would do that either, because you're asking. On the other hand, that taught me a few things. It taught me to know that I needed to be happy in myself and know what I could contribute both to a team, but what I could get out from a team. It shouldn't ever just be one way. It shouldn't just be sucking that energy and that skill set out of that one person. What can we give back to that person as well that really makes that team sing? And that's what I think, happiness. What is happiness? Define it. You can't define it. It's intangible. It's something that you just feel intrinsically in your body when everything is just singing along nicely.
Yeah, I often say in workshops I run with clients when I'm getting them to think about when they've really worked as a team and individually at their best, I say, think of a time when you've put your laptop away or you've left the office and you've just got a real spring in your step. It's been a great day and you're feeling on cloud nine. Because I think we all know we've had days, hopefully, and we remember that feeling. It's like, yeah, it's good. I'm loving where I work. I love what I do. I'm having fun and I'm feeling fulfilled. I think that's what we want to, if we can harness that and create the conditions for everyone to do that a lot more of the time, then you can imagine the huge benefits to organizations from doing that.
Well, we all know today it's raining, but we all know the little bit of sort of like extra pumped upness it gives us when it's been sunny. And to me, that
Yeah.
again is something with individuals. If someone smiles at you, it's like a ray of sunshine. It makes you feel, it probably gets the endorphins going and makes you feel so much happier.
Yeah, absolutely. I know. I always contrast on the school run in with my 12-year-old. It's like if she's feeling a bit down, it's invariably a bit cloudy, and we do to try and point that out. And if we're feeling positive, we're like, oh yeah, might be something to do with the fact it's blue sky and it's lovely outside. So coming back to teams and work, really interesting to hear how you encourage line managers to take that time to sit and talk with people one to one and understand what's going on, what they care about, what they'd like more of, or perhaps less of. Do you in any way evaluate how effective managers are at appreciating individuals and supporting team members as individuals? Because I'm only asking that because I know how crucial your one's own relationship with the line manager is in terms of likelihood to stay in the organization, sense of engagement, etc. So I just wondered how far you go down in terms of knowing how strong your line managers are in these emotionally intelligent skills.
Actually, very insightful question and quite a difficult one in some ways to answer. I had a conversation earlier on this week. Sometimes you can have some really massively, superbly brilliant senior people. Yeah, they can go out, they can consult, they could sell anything to anybody, but they're not very good man managers. And I'm really pushing at the moment for saying, then why can't we just employ people for the brilliance that they have? And then they have a second in command, let's say, who is the person who is the emotional IQ, the people person. And I think in some departments, we're beginning to evolve that construct. It's
Mm.
quite a difficult thing to fight against. As I was growing up through business, it was very much a case of you didn't get promoted unless you managed people. That was sort of part of the checklist. Whereas I think there is the ability now to be a bit more fluid and flexible and take people for the strengths they have and allow them to lean into that. And whilst you're not telling them they don't have to learn emotional IQ or other elements, they don't have to do it as much as someone who maybe really excels at that and you can put into that role. How do we evaluate? Answering your question specifically is in our review process, and we've just got a new one in the last 18 months. It's a brilliant platform. I really love it. It's very intuitive. You can go in it all throughout the year. As long as you do one formal appraisal, then you can use it to trigger your one-to-ones. So it will align with your diary. You will then tell you when you have the meeting with that person, what is that person's objectives? So that they're front of mind every time you have that conversation. And then not only that, when you've got the feedback, we have 2 points that are softer, let's say, about an individual's way of engaging. We ask feedback on that individual from a 360 perspective about how they connect with others and how they exhibit DE and I. Now, they don't always get to see the report from that. As the main line manager, you can choose to expose it or not, or paraphrase it in your own way. But that is definitely a way that we can start to evaluate, has this person connected with this individual or with their team in a way that is meaningful above and beyond what they do on a day-to-day basis. It's a hard thing. It's quite nebulous to to measure those things. But we have two questions. One, to get people to feedback on how they think that specific person is delivering DE&I within RAPP, and one on their connectivity and supportiveness of their team member.
That's really interesting. I'm really impressed that you've got both the very practical tools to help it, but that you do, I guess, actively seek that feedback at, a very thorough level across the organisation. That's really impressive. And I know,
And it does hit home. Sorry to talk
that's
over
okay.
you, Helen, but I was literally just thinking about someone that is my direct report, and I did their. I'll keep it completely neutral. Did their review recently, and one of their team members wrote in, "I really appreciate the way they want me to grow in my career. I really appreciate my one-to-ones with them when I have them. They get cancelled too often. So I would rather have one really good one once a month rather than a short one every week, because I do really respect and believe this person can help me in my career." And when I fed it back, this person was, "Oh my goodness, I hadn't thought of that. I kept thinking I have to do it every week, and then I was running out of time." And I said, "No, this person is asking for quality, not quantity. If you have a really good quality half an hour with them once a month, they're going to get so much more out of that, and the connectivity you're going to build, than keep trying to fit in and then cancelling for 15-minute slots."
Yeah, that's really interesting to hear. And it makes me also think that, if you're a manager with, say, 5 people in your team, there might be quite different needs and preferences around the frequency of those check-ins. And some might need quite a high touch, but regular, but shorter sessions. Others might, exactly as the person you described, value a longer stretch between them, but more deep dive when they do have the conversation. So again, that's very much can vary by individual as well. And so we've talked a bit about managers and teams. I'm interested to hear a bit about and kind of think about with you how we do this at scale across groups as well, because you can get teams where you've got great people manager, there's great team spirit, etc., but they can still feel a little bit either homogenous or familiar, and they're not so well connected or appreciative of all the other brilliant people that are out there in other teams in the rest of the organization. So how do you go about encouraging that awareness of individuality on a bigger scale across the organization? How do you bring people together to understand people, the whole variety of experiences and interests that people have?
Again, I think this is very much an important aspect of being at work and being your full self, showing up authentically. And at RAPP, there's 2 or 3 things we do to try and do that. We have an initiative called the Neighbourhood, which is a collective of tribes or communities, whichever word you want to use, that then bring together different types of groups that you might recognize yourself as. So there is the parents one, there's the carers one, there's disability and mental health, there's the LGBTQ one, there's the race and culture one, there's a sustainability one. So there's all of these, what are more traditionally called, I suppose, ERGs, but they are self-run by the colleagues. So we deliberately did not put a senior leadership team person in charge of them. We said, if you want a community, you can have a community, and it's a safe space for how you want to run that. And then what we ask of them in return is that they put on what I refer to as intersectional events. So if we have an event across the business, we make sure every community has a voice in that. So most recently for Earth Week or Earth Day, we had the sustainability team driving what they wanted to do, but also we had a curiosity lab or a talk from a recent parent on how his sustainable life was took a bit of a tipping point once he had this young baby, and there were disposable nappies and all of these other things that he'd really worked hard at eradicating from his life. At the same time as someone talking from a mental health perspective about something I didn't even know existed, which is eco anxiety. There are so many people now that are suffering from eco anxiety, and we had a speaker come in and talk about that. So there's that sort of community spirit. Then there are two other initiatives which all help that connectivity outside of your immediate group. One is called NextCo. So every 6 months, we ask people to put themselves forward to join a NextCo committee, which is usually middle ranking, but sometimes it's junior, sometimes it's more senior people come together. We have 20 people on NextCo 4.0 at the moment. They've divided themselves into 3 individual working groups that in that 6 months, each group will deliver against a specific initiative that they've come up with. And as long as it resonates with the business and builds a sense of purpose and belonging with our colleagues, the world's their oyster. They can come up with what they want. All they have to do is bring it to our chairman for them to decide whether it should go ahead or not. And then our third big initiative is called Table Makers, which is a sponsorship program. So there are 20 people on that at the moment. Primarily, this is our second cohort, and it's primarily focused on women and people of colour, because having looked at our industry and looked at those more marginalised or underrepresented groups in our industry, it was the women and it was the people of colour that were not staying so long. The retention was really low, and we wanted to try and help change that. And a lot of that was down to what you mentioned, connectivity, being connected with people outside of your immediate team. That's a year-long path for each of those sponsees with a sponsor, and their sponsor is always a senior leadership team member. They will increase their network, they will take them to events. My sponsee, I took to the Women in Tech event in Paris last week. So she came with me for 3 days. She reckons it was a real game changer. She absolutely loved it. She didn't think she could ever network with people, and she did. And it was just so lovely to take someone and really get them to step outside of their comfort zone. So they're the 3 big initiatives that we have here at RAPP to try and improve people's connectivity across the business.
Yeah, that's really impressive. And I love the way, your neighborhood initiative is very open. Anyone can join or, put together, organize a community. It's really for everyone to choose how they'd like to participate. And then it sounds like the next co is a little bit more kind of targeted, a little bit more structured with particular goals of, I guess, being creative, right, about business opportunities or organizational opportunities. And then table makers, again, quite targeted again to specific groups of people and more one-to-one support, I guess. So I love the way they complement each other from what you've described. And with the neighborhood, initiative that you've described. It's interesting hearing that, because obviously a lot of other organizations have got ERGs or employee resource groups or employee networks. And traditionally they have been, as each one quite separate with their own chairs, etc., and assigned a name and an executive sponsor. And of late, I had been hearing actually a trend starting to pull away from that into one inclusion network. But actually, you're taking a different approach still, which we're not labeling it inclusion. We're giving it a name that can be meaningful to anyone. And there's the freedom, there to create a community around whatever I guess you feel passionate about and want to support others about at work. And I love the ask about the intersectionality of that. And it sounds like through certainly neighborhood, and I guess table makers as well, you're really encouraging people to feel that they can share and be open about some of their aspirations, but also their lived experiences. And I guess their stories, right, that they bring as 360 degree individuals inside and outside of work.
I think lived experiences is really, really important. In fact, that's if everything needs guidelines, if you like, rather than tram lines for people. We're human, so we like a bit of a guardrail every so often. And that is one of the things that we will say is if someone stands up and talks about an initiative or how they feel or their viewpoint, it has to be from a lived experience. It's not about trying to convert everybody to your way of thinking. It's not about saying you're right and everybody else is wrong. As long as it comes from your own lived experience, no one can judge you. But like I quite often will say to people, if they're struggling at work with a situation, is that if they craft the time and craft the script, go to the person that's causing them this angst and position it on the basis of, I just want you to hear me for about 15 minutes, and it's how I feel. I'm not even maybe asking you to give me the solution, but it's how I feel, because no one can tell you how you should feel. And so that's a very good way of getting that lived experience across. And then people tend to listen, engage, ask more questions, and then the
Mm.
awareness and the knowledge of that topic is so much deeper.
Yeah, I think that's great advice, that I just want to tell you something and I just want you to listen, because our instinct is always to think somebody's asking something of me that requires a solution or an action or something. So I think that that's really great advice. We could probably talk about this for so much longer, but we have come to the end of our podcasting time together. It's just been fascinating hearing about how you at RAPP are enabling people to feel that they can, be themselves in every respect at work and be understood and seen and appreciated for that, but also from an organizational perspective, the different ways you create opportunities for people to connect with one another and appreciate each other's wondrous diversity, and some of the things I'm taking away are, guidelines, not tram lines, and the power of asking regularly open questions and just listening, and how motivating that can be for people. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. If people listening want to connect with you professionally, what's the best way for them to do that?
On LinkedIn is the best way to do it. I don't mind people reaching into me. LinkedIn, that's absolutely fine by me.
Great,
I
thank
would
you.
like to say, Helen, it's been a joy speaking to you. And I do make it sound like it's easy. None of this is easy. And there are times when it's difficult to do, and it's difficult to stay on that track of doing the best you can. So
Hmm.
it's the right way to do it. It's not always easy to do, though.
Such a great point. We're here talking about your successes and achievements at RAP, but I know they may feel quite hard won at times, or
Yes.
have taken
Yeah.
longer than you might have liked, or whatever. Wonderful. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. You've been an absolutely brilliant guest. Thank you, Carolyn.
Brilliant. Thank you, Helen. Take care.